The question is that this House do now adjourn. Mr. David Burrowes.
Thank you much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't know if it's something that's in the water, but Enfield has recently produced constituents who have cases of high national importance and are challenging the legislation or international treaties or indeed guidance. I refer, of course, to my constituent Gary McKinnon, indeed my neighbouring constituent Andrew Simiyu, and now, and this is the subject of this debate, in Puddick. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't wish to entertain the House with the salacious details of this case, which are at times complex, other times bizarre, and frankly quite frightening. I do, though, wish to explore the principles and practice involved in this case, which no doubt the whole House will be concerned about, and which are indeed fundamental. My primary concern, and one that no doubt the whole House shares, is around that principle of equality before the law. The principle, indeed, that money and wealth should not be used to warp the course of natural justice, and that equality should not be eroded in the age of the internet, and indeed, as we've seen in recent time, the age of super injunctions. First, Madam Deputy Speaker, it would be only right, given that it's the subject of the debate, for me to explain some of the details of the case of my constituent in Puddick. In June 2009, Mr. Puddick became aware that his wife was having an affair with her employer, who is a board member of a large reinsurance firm. He found explicit text messages from this man on her phone, which then led to her confession that the affair had indeed been ongoing for some 10 years. In his emotional state, my constituent began calling clients of this large firm and informing them that their manager had been using company expenses to fund an affair with another employee. When the manager concerned became aware of this, he hired a private security firm linked to his organisation to discredit my constituent and indeed, in course, build a case of harassment. Mr. Puddick received a phone call from the chief executive of this security firm, who reportedly said to my constituent, "Our pockets are deep, we will bury you." How was he buried? Well, in August of the same year, my constituent's home, his office, and indeed his company accountants were raided by 16 officers from the City of London Police Counter Terrorism and Major Crimes Directorate. They removed his PCs, his mobile phones, laptops, digital cameras, and even his personal sat-nav, and sent all of this equipment to a high-technology crime laboratory for testing. My constituent was subsequently arrested, where he decided not to have a lawyer. He then gave a full and frank confession that he made those phone calls to clients, and indeed he apologised at the same time. He was then charged, and charged with that, attached to that were stringent police bail conditions. And then when he attended court on the first occasion, those bail conditions were relaxed by the court, because it became immediately apparent that my constituent, who is a man of good character, that he was someone who was not at risk of committing any act of violence, that he was likely to continue to make any threats of any kind, and the court realised that this needs to be dealt with proportionately. I also understand from my constituent that, to the surprise of the magistrates, the officer in the case, when asked about the evidence that was formed the basis of this case of harassment, was informed that my constituent's wife had not even provided a statement. So despite all the, some would say extreme, many would say disproportionate, and certainly expensive investigations that was very much aligned to a major crime, despite all of that resource, the one witness statement one would expect to come forward did not come. So immediately, any right-minding person listening to this, and certainly listening at the back of that court when Mr. Puddick first came into the public gaze, would have questioned, why is this happening? Well, a trial was set for April the following year. However, before this date, the man who had an affair with Mr. Puddick's wife resigned from his position, and the case was dropped. Well, Mr. Speaker, that may well, you'd have thought, have been the end of it, and it would simply have led to perhaps complaints, as indeed it happened to the Police Complaints Authority, and that would have been processed in the usual way, and indeed we would not have ended up in this position here at 4:15 on a Thursday afternoon discussing this case. Well, Mr. Puddick himself decided for his own reasons that he, one could perhaps understand and have a great deal of sympathy that he was rightly appalled by what had happened, and particularly concerned about the disproportionate actions that he felt the police had pursued. He then set up a blog, www.ianpuddick.com, to which he uploaded a love letter sent to his wife, as well as a video explaining the disproportionate response of the police, and also questioning the actions of the private security firm. Entries of the website www.policeexpenses.com and other similar addresses were redirected to the original blog. And then, seemingly, as far as my constituent was concerned, out of nowhere, he was then arrested again in May 2010, this time not by the local police force, the local detectives, but by the City of London Police Murder Squad. He was told by investigating officers that he could not put this information on the internet. My constituent replied, well, I'm just putting forward information that's true. And then the response, some would say even the chilling response when one's looking at issues of freedom of speech from the police, was apparently this: even if it is completely true, you have committed a criminal offence. Mr. Puddick was subsequently charged, again with harassment, but this time on the specific grounds that he created and distributed 3 websites which were designed to discredit an individual both professionally and personally. My constituent denied all these allegations, and indeed the court case went to the Magistrates' Court, and June of this year it was put to the magistrates that Mr. Puddick was guilty of harassment, indeed harassment through Facebook, through Twitter and his website. And indeed it's those extra allegations that were made which also contributed it reaching national headlines. It was later proved in court that, in fact, under cross-examination at an early stage, that indeed there was no use of Facebook and Twitter whatsoever. By way of an explanation, I understand an officer from the City of London Police offered the reason that the Counter Terrorism and the Murder Squad were called was the level of distress she believed my constituent was causing through his websites. Mr. Speaker, one can only surmise just if that a basis for the distress caused by a website, if that was a view taken when looking across the internet at other websites for using the very precious and important resources of the Counter Terrorism and the Murder Squad. And I'm grateful that the Minister of Police is here to be able to particularly take note of that concern. Well, my constituent was finally found not guilty on the charge of harassment on the 17th of June of this year. Well, listening to this extraordinary tale, some may believe that this is simply an operational issue, an issue that really belongs on, as did indeed happen on this case, on the pages of the tabloids, and not in this chamber. However, as I said from the outset of this debate, there is an important and very key point of principle, the principle of equality before the law. And as my constituent has stated on numerous occasions, if this can happen to him, then this can happen to anyone. There are, Mr. Speaker, 2 key points in this case that I'd like to raise and put to the Minister. The first is the issue of the apparent influence of wealth and authority in the implementation of the law. It seems clear that if it were not for the well-connected private security company and the high profile of the business involved, my constituent would not have experienced such a proportionate use of force and response. If there's another reason, no one is aware of it. Indeed, it's interesting that the man who had the affair with Mr. Puddick's wife was even advised by police in Sussex, in the county where he lives, that this was a civil and not a criminal matter. Indeed, anyone looking at this case would say that it seems to be a very reasonable judgment to make. But despite that, the City of London police were approached, and then the raid in May 2009 followed. The second raid almost a year later, following the publication